Okay, so welcome chemistry students. So we're looking at this equation, strontium hydroxide and ammonium sulfide, and it's going to react to produce strontium sulfide and ammonium hydroxide. So what you should be looking at in particular is these compounds here. All right, so strontium hydroxide. Do you see any prefixes on strontium hydroxide? Do you see mono, di, tri, tetra, penta, hexa, hepta, octa, nona, deca? No. And when you don't see those, you should know that they are ionic, and you're going to have to look at their charges in order to get the formula. All right, so you're going to have to look at the charges in order to get the formula. And that's just for strontium hydroxide. We have to look at each of these individually. So we're going to be writing the balanced equation. And so in order to write the balanced equation, we have to know the formulas for each of these. And if we know strontium hydroxide is ionic, then we have to go over and write our formula. And so let's write our formula for strontium hydroxide. Okay, so the first thing you're going to need to know is what is the formula for strontium. So if you go to your periodic table, you can see right here, number 38, that is strontium. And you should have, by now, written on your periodic table, all right, the charges above each group. The charges above each group. And so what we see above strontium is a +2 charge. So strontium has a +2 charge. And so this is what you're supposed to write: 1 and 2 and 3 and -3, -2, and -1. All right. And I'm going to come back to this here in a second. So we know, and if you want to type, you're more than welcome to type. I'm going to use the scribble feature in this lesson. So we have strontium, and it has a +2 charge. And then the next thing they have is hydroxide. All right, hydroxide. Well, a lot of people think that hydroxide is hydrogen. That is not true. That is not true. Hydroxide is a polyatomic ion, and you can see it right here, OH. All right, it has OH is the formula for hydroxide, and it has a -1 charge. So it's OH -1. All right, OH -1. So we'll type that in, and we'll say, or we'll write it in, however you want to do it. It does not matter to me, and that's going to be fine. So what you have there is the charges of strontium and hydroxide. When you add them up, does the sum equal 0? When you add 2 and -1, does the sum equal 0? That's an easy answer. No, right? And so when your answer is no, that the sum of the charges equals 0, then you have to do the cross technique. And so what you would do for a polyatomic, and all polyatomics, before you do the cross technique, make sure that you are adding a parenthesis. You have to add a parenthesis. Otherwise, you will find yourself getting these incorrect. And so you're going to put the 2. Notice I didn't say +2, just 2. And then you're going to put the 1 down here. Notice I didn't say -1. I just put the 1. And what this means is that I have 1 strontium and 1 hydroxide. All right, so that means I have 1 strontium and 1 hydroxide. So it is, and I can't write my formula in over here right now because I have the wrong setting. You have the right setting, and we've been doing this for a while, so you should know how to do that. So what this means, though, is I have 1 strontium, and if you look at this, maybe I can write strontium with a 1+ charge, and it means I have 2 hydroxide, each with a -1 charge. And I wrote the wrong charge on strontium. It's actually not +1, it's actually +2. All right, I did it right the first time. So when you add these up, 2 plus -1 plus -1, you get 0. All right, now you don't need to show this step. I'm just showing you what this means. And so what you'll be doing is you'll be rewriting this picture into your answer. All right, and it is SR parentheses OH2. All right, and so that's what that means. If you do not put the parentheses, what you're actually writing is this. You're writing SR2 plus and OH2. That is not the same thing. All right. That is not the same thing. So this would be incorrect. All right. You have to put the parentheses on your polyatomics, especially when there's more than one, and there's two of them there. Okay. So in your answer spot, you would put SR parentheses OH2. Of course, y'all are doing this on a piece of paper anyway. Okay. So the next thing. So we're going to now add strontium hydroxide to our equation. Notice it's the first compound in our equation. So let's go ahead and write that into our equation. And so we're writing our equation, and we're going to be building this equation. So it is SR, and I'm going to leave I want to make sure you do this too. Leave a little space for a subscript, or not for a subscript, for a coefficient. But we're going to put SrOH parentheses 2. All right. So strontium hydroxide. Now we have that, and it's the right formula. All right. When you put your answer in for your compounds, it will either be green or red. If it's red, then you have the wrong formula, and you need to change it. All right. But here we know we got a green. We know it's good, and so we wrote it in. Strontium hydroxide. And what do we use when we see the word and? You know? You can say it, a plus sign. That's very good. So we use a plus sign. So we're going to use the plus sign here. And then I'm just going to make sure I leave myself a little place for a coefficient. But then I got to write the next compound, ammonium sulfide. Ammonium sulfide. And so, do you see any prefixes in ammonium sulfide? Monodi, tri, tetra, penta, hexa, hepta, octa, nona, deca. No. That means it is ionic, and we have to look at the charge of the ions. All right, so we're going to pause on this, and we're going to go find ammonium sulfide. So ammonium sulfide, we need to make sure we can write that formula. The other thing you're going to need to know is what is ammonium. Now, if you look at your periodic table, you're going to say, I don't see ammonium on here. That's true. That's absolutely true. Because it's not on your periodic table. That's because it's a polyatomic ion. If you look right here under the positive 1, you have the ammonium ion. All right, NH4. NH4. It's really one of the only polyatomic ions that we're going to use. So NH4 is ammonium. All right, ammonium. And so we know the formula for ammonium is NH4. Now, do we know the charge? The charge is +1. So that's very important that we know that as well. So we have +1, or I say 1+. Doesn't matter which one you use. All right, so we did that. The next thing we need to find is sulfide. Sulfide. Sulfide is giving you, it sounds like one thing, like sulfur as an ion, and that's exactly what it is. It is sulfur as an ion. So if we look at our periodic table here, or if we just move this over, maybe we need to do that. We see sulfur, and sulfur as an ion is sulfide. It has a -2 charge. Another place to look for that is on this sheet, and it could, because it tells you, even though it's not a polyatomic, it says sulfide, -2, right? And that formula is just S. All right, so it's consistent with what's on the periodic table. So you have an S, and the charge was -2. Do the sum of the charges equal 0? No. So what do we do with these polyatomics when we have more than one atom in an ion? What are we supposed to do with those? What are we supposed to do? Parentheses. Parentheses. So let's put a parentheses on this. Parentheses. And now we can move the number, not the charge, so that we get the right answer. And so what you should show for your formula is NH4, and you're putting that in parentheses, 2S. And what this means, you don't have to show this part. I'm just telling you, you don't have to show this. You're going to have to write this in as your answer, but you don't have to show this part. What this means is you have NH4 NH4, and they both have a 1+ charge, and then you have an S with the 2- charge. If you look, 1 + 1 is 2, -2, 0. Do you see that? It works. All right, so, but you don't need to show this step here. I'm just showing you that indeed the sum of the charges are 0. All right, so what you would do is you would type this in your formula, and if you get a green, then you know it's good. And we happen to get a green, so we know it's good. So now we're going to go back to our equation, and let's plug this in. So we're going to have ammonium sulfide. We said that was parentheses NH4 parentheses 2 and then S. All right, and then the next thing we see is that we react to produce. What do we use when we see react to produce? Y'all remember that? What do we use? Arrow, all right? So the arrow separates reactants from products. On this side of the equation, we have reactants. They react, and they form products on the other side of the arrow. So when I say reactants and products, you should know what that means by now. All right, so now they're producing the products, see, to produce, and now these things are products. So the next one that we see is strontium sulfide. So let's, when you look at the name strontium sulfide, you should notice that it does not have any prefixes. You don't see mono, di, tri, none of them, right? All the way to deca. And so we know it is ionic, and we have to look at the charges. By now you should know, because we looked at this earlier, that strontium is Sr, and it has a +2 charge, right? It's still strontium, the strontium ion, and it still has a +2 charge, all right? Nothing's changed. And then you should know about sulfide, because we looked it up earlier. Sulfide is sulfur as an ion, a -2 charge. So we have S, one day I'll figure that out, S, and it has a -2 charge. Now, do the sum of the charges equal 0? Sr +2 and -2. When you add those together, does it give you 0? Yes, yes. So when you see that, there is no need for a cross technique. Actually, you would be wrong if you used it. All you're going to do is write one of each. So your formula is SRS. You already have the sum of the charges equaling 0. You should not make them, you should not do this number here. Do not do this and say a 2 and a 2 and then say SR2, S2. That would be incorrect. All right. So if they already equal 0, leave it alone and write one of each. And so that's the formula for strontium sulfide. So we're going to write that in. And we have a little space for our coefficient, and then we write SRS. And then it says to produce strontium sulfide and when we see the word and, we are using the plus sign. And then we are going to leave a little space for our next coefficient, and we're going to find ammonium hydroxide. And ammonium hydroxide does not have prefixes, so we know it's ionic and that we need to go look at the charges. We should be familiar with ammonium. We looked it up earlier, and we said that ammonium was NH4, and it had a +1 charge. So here we are with NH4, and it has a +1 charge. And then we should also be familiar with hydroxide. If we go to the back side of our polyatomic ion sheet, we find hydroxide, and it is OH, and it has a -1 charge. And so we say OH, -1. Do the sum of the charges equal 0? Is 1 plus -1? Yeah. So all you have to do is write one of each, NH4, OH. Some of you are like, well, what about the parentheses? Aren't we supposed to put a parentheses? Well, when the sum of the charges already equals 0, it's not necessary. But if you did put a parentheses, there's nothing wrong with it because this is also correct. That is also correct. This is also correct. And this is also correct. They're all correct. Do you see that? Every one of those are correct. So we added a parentheses. It wasn't necessary, but it's not wrong. If you need a parentheses and you don't add it, then that's a problem. All right, that's a big problem. Okay, so all of these are correct. You can just choose one of them, and that would be good. All right, so I'm just showing you they're either or. Okay, so we have one of each of those, and so we'll put that in our equation. And so in our equation, we write NH4 OH. And then in our last lesson, we did some counting, and we said when we have polyatomic ions that we can write them in our count. So here we have an OH, and over here we have an OH. So we can write OH in our count. We have an NH4 here, and we have an NH4 here. So we can write those in our count. So we can say SR OH, and that's because they're found on both sides of the equation. Here's the dividing line between reactants and products. So, and then we have ammonium, NH4. And we see that on both sides of the equation, NH4 and NH4. And then we have sulfur. Okay, so now all we have to do is count and make sure to see if we need to balance this. So we have a strontium, and there are only one strontium. Now, some people are saying that there are two. This two is only applying to everything that's in that parentheses. Notice the strontium is outside of the parentheses, and it does not have a subscript. So there's only one. If you look at the hydroxide, the OH is in the parentheses, and it has a subscript of 2. So how many hydroxide are there? 2. You look at the NH4, it is in a parentheses, and it has a subscript of 2. So it also has 2. And then sulfur is outside of the parentheses, no subscript, 1. When we go to the other side, we see that we have strontium. There's no subscripts. There's only 1. We see sulfur. There's no subscripts. There's only 1. We see NH4. Now notice this is NH4 and this is NH4. There's only 1. There's only 1. Some people are tempted to put 4 there. There's not 4. There's 1 NH4. If there were 4 NH4, it'd be in parentheses and have a subscript. But there's only 1. And then hydroxide is also 1. So now we need to balance this. And so what we're going to do is we are going to see where we are not balanced. You notice we have a 2 here and a 2 here, but we have 1s here. So we have to use a coefficient. And we can only use a coefficient to balance. And a coefficient goes in these little blanks here. All right, that's where coefficients go. And so where are we going to add a coefficient so that we can make these even? I will tell you this, where you have a higher number, you're never going to add the coefficient. You see how the number's lower here? So we're going to add a coefficient to this side so that we can get 2 NH4 or 2 OH. So what coefficient do we need to put here? Yeah, we put a 2. And once we put a 2 here, we can say now, we change our count and say we have 2 NH4, and we also have 2 OH. I don't know why we're just going to write OH, but 2. All right, and that's really all that you need to do there. And so then when you were going to put in your answer, all right, your answer is based off of your coefficients. All right, and your coefficients, if they are left blank, all right, and you can leave them blank, but when it's blank, they mean 1, 1, and 1, and that one has a 2 in it. So when you type in your answer for your balanced equation, you're going to type 1, 1, 1, 2. And that follows the exact same order as your equation. All right. So make sure that you build your equation in the right order as it is written, and then you're going to be in a good shape. All right. And then we have one more thing that I want to share with you. So let me share that with you real quick. Okay, so another option versus writing the compounds into the show your work is that you can take a picture. If you click on the picture feature right here, then all you can do is say image and then say take photo. See, here I am. All right, all masked up. And then make sure that your image can be seen. If I can't see your image or I can't read it, then it is no good. All right, but here is an example. And I'm not sure that I have a great light right where I am, but there is an example of taking a picture, and then you can add the image. You can even resize that so that I can see that a little better. And this would be kind of a bad image. It's really hard for me to see. So make sure that you have you're in the right light and that your image can be seen. You might want to write bigger on your paper if you want to use that, because I'm not going to grade it if I can't read it. So make sure that you're writing bigger, and you want to probably use darker, a darker ink, like a black or a blue or a pencil, and don't write very lightly. And you can use that feature just fine. Otherwise, you're free to type it as we're doing previously. Okay. Anyway, that's all I have. Good luck on doing numbers 1 through 10. Please remember to like and subscribe to my page, and I hope you enjoy this lesson. All right. Thank you very much.